Hello and welcome to my tutorial on how to sew those fancy hero anime gloves. Well, the video is already playing, so let's get right into it. Start by tracing the pattern onto some cardboard or parchment paper. You can use the blueprint for your hand, or you can do like this and make it after your own hand, so you're sure it will fit perfectly. When sewing a glove, it's important that you don't sew it the same width from top to bottom, since your fingers are thicker at the bottom, as you can see on my finger here. Now just cut all of the pattern parts out. And with that out of the way, we can move on. Before we start sewing, let's have a talk about fabrics. Here are some fabrics that I recommend when making gloves. Scuba is a thick fabric, but still stretchy, therefore it's very forgiving when sewing gloves. Leatherette is a fake leather and gives a great look and sound for gloves. It's not stretchy and any mistakes will be visible on the fabric. Oh well, you can't have it all. Next up is suede and stretch suede. Jeez, try to say that 5 times in a row. It has that great skin leather look, and it's more forgiving than leatherette. For the lining, which is what's gonna hold the shape of the cuff, I recommend some stiff cotton or 2 and 4mm EVA foam. For this tutorial, I'm going with scuba. If you didn't know this, there's a front side and a back side to the fabric. So make sure you always trace on the back side of the fabric. Speaking of tracing, that's exactly what we're gonna do. Notice that I have laid the fabric double, so I only have to trace and cut once. But before cutting, secure the fabric with some needles. And now simply cut out the pieces. If you're using the blueprint, you don't need to trace or cut a seam allowance. It's already in the pattern. But if you're making your own pattern for the hand, make sure to trace or cut a seam allowance. Before you start sewing the glove, make sure to secure it with some needles. I'm using white thread here, so you better can see where I have sewn. But you should of course match the thread to the color of your fabric. Try the glove on and see if you need to make any corrections. When that is done, trim around the edges and between the fingers. Now turn the glove inside out. You might want to use a pencil or another pointed tool to help you with the fingers. And this is what you have so far. Notice that the wrist has not been sewn tight, otherwise it's not gonna match the cuff. Lay the 2 fabric pieces on top of each other and pin them together. I have laid this white piece of fabric on top so you can see where you're supposed to sew. But of course you should not do this. Notice that you should not sew this bottom part. Now that you are sewn around the edges, it's time for a more tricky part. And I hope you can see what I'm doing here, because it's a bit difficult to explain. But let's try. First, pin the inner pieces of the fabric together. Then turn the cuff so you can pin the 2 other pieces of the fabric together, so you end up with a cross like this. Sew both pieces of the fabric so you end each time at the middle of the cross. Once you have done that and trimmed around the edges, you can turn the cuff inside out. Before we move on to the lining, press the edges of the cuff with an iron. Trace the lining piece onto fabric or EVA foam. Fold the lining, secure with some needles, and sew this bottom part. And don't worry if you're using EVA foam, you can still sew on that too. Flip the lining inside out and stuff it into the cuff. There we go, nice and pretty. It's finally time to assemble the glove. We're gonna do this by placing the cuff on top of the glove and matching the seams at the sides. Then we're gonna pin them together all the way around. It can be a bit tricky, but take your time and work all the way around. Make sure the lining is secured between the 2 layers of the cuff. Once it has been pinned, sew all the way around. Now all that's left to do is trim the edges. If you have an overlock, feel free to give it a round with that too. Otherwise the glove is done and ready to go. So here it is, the fancy hero glove. Notice that mine looks a bit big, since I made it out of my standard glove pattern that can fit everyone, but you can easily trim the pattern and get a different look. Let me show you another glove. This one I made out of leatherette and sew the cuff smaller and as one piece. This gives quite a different look. So don't be scared to play around with the pattern. And now you can become the hero of the everyday life. Thank you so much for watching my video. Don't be shy to give it a like. If there's any tutorials you want to see, let me know in the comments. And I hope to see you in another video.